before we begin, how would you describe survival mode?
Well, I think it has a place, right? Because we are wired to survive. And this is probably cliche, and a lot of people have heard it before, but we are wired to survive the saber-toothed tiger. And nowadays, our brain can't really differentiate between if our boss standing in front of us giving us a new deadline or us being in the ER with our child is a quote unquote safer place than being in front of a saber-toothed tiger, or if we really need to inject all of our survival instincts into that moment. So I would I used to describe survival mode as doing whatever I could in the moment to just keep going, just white knuckling it through life. And to the point where it brought me to my knees. You hear that about resilience. Resilience is about when you fall down and then pick or claw your way back up. And I got to a point where I knew I could not survive in survival mode anymore. My body, my mind, my emotions, my spirit started telling me that. And so I looked for another way to show up.
I respect that so much. I think, as you said, we are wired to survive, and a lot of our survival instincts are prehistoric.
Yes.
We definitely have taken things from our ancestors.
Mhm.
And the same is true oftentimes with our trauma. It comes
Yeah.
from our ancestors as well. Welcome to Survival Mode Disrupted, the podcast for those who are done performing, done people pleasing, and done living life on autopilot. I'm your host, Letitia, the Survival Mode Disruptor, and this is where we create disruptive, unapologetic transformations for those who are ready to exit survival mode and reclaim their power. Every episode is your permission slip to burn the rule book, break the cycle, and finally build a life that feels like yours. So let's disrupt everything that's holding you back and start living life on your own terms. This is your trigger warning. This podcast is raw. It is real and it doesn't sugarcoat what it means to survive trauma, abuse, mental health battles, or even the aftermath of living in survival mode for too damn long. What you hear on Survival Mode Disrupted includes unfiltered stories, graphic details, and a vulnerable truth that may trigger some of the audience. Please prioritize your emotional safety. If something feels too heavy, pause, breathe, come back when you're ready, or not at all. Your healing is yours to honor. These episodes are based on lived experience, not therapy sessions or clinical advice. Listening does not replace mental health treatment or constitute a coach client relationship. If you're in crisis, please seek immediate help from a licensed professional or contact your local emergency services. This space is built with care, but it's also built for truth and built for disruption. Take what you need, leave the rest, and most of all, trust yourself. If this podcast speaks to your soul, you don't have to do this work alone. Feel free to join our free Facebook community for high achieving women ready to break cycles and heal out loud. Join us at Disrupting Survival Mode on Facebook, or grab the book that started this movement, Exiting Survival Mode, raw step by step guide to help you identify, release, and rebuild from the survival patterns that have been keeping you stuck. Hello, 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 and welcome back to another episode of Survival Mode Disrupted. I am your host, Letitia, the Survival Mode Disruptor. And today we have Jenn. Jenn, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I am Jenn Fredericks, and I am a recovering survivalist, I guess I would say. I have lived the survival mode for years and years, and I found a way to disrupt it and figure out a way to live life the way that I want to, regardless of the circumstance I'm facing. I am a daughter, wife, mother, music lover, cat grandma, and I am also a prosilience coach or proactive resilience coach and a personal resilience practitioner.
Okay, so interesting. So now I'm curious. Tell us your story to and through survival mode.
Right. So the first time I think I was really fighting for my life and fighting to survive was when I was 14, going on 15, and had not a brush with, it's still with me, chronic kidney disease. Not really sure how it started, why it started. It's not genetic. They think maybe it was a case of untreated strep throat that affected my kidneys and took both of them. They stopped working slowly but surely. And I went through dialysis while some of my very, very beautiful family got worked up to possibly be a kidney donor. And I actually did. I received a kidney from my dad when I was 16. So, well, at the time, I don't think I was living in trauma. As I start to do some more somatic work and listen to my body, I do know that that medical trauma was stored within me. So I got through that very well. That kidney lasted 18 years. It got me through all of those life milestones I was hoping to experience: high school graduation, college, finding a job, meeting my husband, and adopting a daughter. And then in 2015, my daughter was diagnosed with a low-grade brain tumor. Yeah, she's doing okay, but it's been 10 years of that trauma, and me thinking I had it all figured out because I've been doing this since 1993. I know the medical system, but when it's someone you love so deeply, it's a completely different story. And I wasn't really sure how to do anything other than just survive so that I could start supporting her. And I was great in the hospital setting. Give me all her specialists. I can advocate, I can talk, but when it comes down to the mental and emotional aspects of survival mode, I did not have tools for that. And so I fell down. I fell down hard. And thankfully, I didn't stay there. But that's really my trauma centers around the whole, I think, distrust that you can feel once your body fails you. And then the distrust you have when your loved one's body is failing them. And then loss of confidence in self when you can't support them the way that you want to. And so that trauma hit me hard. And it also taught me life-changing lessons.
I'm curious to hear about the lessons that you learned as a result of this. But before we get there, I there there are different phases and elements to survival mode, right? Like I think while we tend to experience similar things while we're in it, as far as the emotional toll that it can take on us, the physical toll that it takes on us, having to navigate that trauma, and especially if we don't have the tools to navigate it correctly, our body doesn't forget. What would you say, having been in it for yourself, like literally surviving to stay alive versus your daughter dealing with it? What would you say was the biggest difference? And why do you think your daughter's experience hit you so hard?
All great questions. And I just realized I completely skipped over the part where I had a second kidney transplant in 2012. I mean, that's how normal it is in my life right now. It's
Okay.
just like it's part of me. It's how I
Mm-hmm.
live. So I'm gonna go back to my first transplant in 1993. That survival mode was different because I had this feeling of immortality, of yes, I'm sick, but they can fix me. So let's just get on with the fixing so I can get on with life. I think most of that I kind of held in my body for a long time and didn't really process through it. But there are times like right when we first heard about my kidney disease, and then I went in for a biopsy, and there's moments of survival mode then when you're just in the moment and trying to get through the moment and live. And then there's the fallout afterwards where you actually have downtime to think about, wow, I really just like went through all of that. But at that age, 15, 16, I just kind of pushed it down or pushed it aside because I wanted to go to the dances. I wanted to get my driver's license. I wanted to get into college. I would say for my kidney transplant in 2012, it was very different because here I am responsible not only for my survival, but also my husband. How is he handling this? He's never experienced this type of thing before with a loved one. And my daughter then was 4 at the time. And how do you explain that mommy can't hold you because she just had a major surgery. So then it did start to, I was physically focused on healing. Like I had no thoughts really other than one of I'm not going to survive this. I think maybe once I thought, well, what happens if something happens on the table? And then I pushed it down or pushed it aside. But it was more so, how do I make sure they're okay emotionally, mentally as I heal? With my daughter, it was just like a whole thing pushing down on me and suffocating me, and the weight was so intense that I had every belief that she was going to be okay physically, that we were going to find ways to support her, but just this overwhelming uncertainty brought me to my knees repeatedly, and every time I would get back up, it was like, oh, here comes another thing. Oh, here's another way that this isn't going the way we had hoped. So I kind of forgot the question you asked, but
No, we were just exploring the differences in
mm,
survival mode between your experience and your daughter's experience. And I think what you said made sense, even with the differences in your two experiences, right? Like you, as a 15-year-old, you were really focused on life, right? Like, let me
yes,
get through this so I can live my life. I'm assuming 33, because you said the kidney lasted 18
18.
years.
Yep.
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 So
You're really
around,
good at math.
thank you. So around 33, now you have additional responsibilities. The
Mhm.
things that were in scope for you at 15 are completely different because now you're building this family unit. You have responsibilities. Yeah, your parents loved you, but now you've built your own family, right? And
Right.
I can imagine that I don't know if I'm going to use the right word, but maybe guilt that was associated with the process, having to
Mhm.
put your husband through something that he hadn't been through before. And then without knowing like the prognosis at the time, I'm sure there was immense fear for you as well, because now you're having to face
Mhm.
mortality in a sense, right? But then on the flip side of that, now after years of experience with yourself, you're now watching your child go through, and I again, not without the information of like how bad things were, the prognosis
Yes.
was,
Yeah. Yeah.
I can still see that dance with mortality in a different light, because now you want her to experience life and her to have be able to tick all the boxes that you were able to beyond your first
Yeah,
experience.
definitely. And in another layer too, having had adopted her,
Hmm.
we're entrusted
Hmm.
with giving her the best life that she can have. And here she is experiencing, this very difficult diagnosis that is basically a lifetime diagnosis because it's not in a place that where the tumor can be totally resected. So we're basically working with treatments as they come out to keep things stable. One thing I was going to say that went away for a minute and it'll come back, but it was that thought of the dance with mortality.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I've done that tango quite a few times. And now I see it more as a waltz
Hmm.
because I have done a lot of work around my fear of dying or my fear of others dying. And it's not a lot of people want to talk about it, but I do have a strong belief in something larger than myself. I have a belief and a knowing that everything is energy. And even when our physical manifestation in our body changes into an energetic one, that I'll still be connected. So
Hmm.
that took years
Hmm.
to come to, but it brings me comfort. Some people it upsets, and I understand. But being able to have that knowing and belief for myself has allowed me to turn that difficult dance into more of a flow in a waltz. I mean, it is the circle of life. It is literally what happens with each and every one of us. We just don't know all of the circumstances leading up to it.
Absolutely. And I think that brings us to an important point before we cycle back to the lessons you learned in survival mode.
Sure.
But one of the things that I often bring up in this podcast is acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people think that acceptance is synonymous with condoning what is happening, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And I think what I heard you say in so many words
Mm-hmm.
is you were able to come to a point where you can accept death,
Yes.
which then meant you kind of not stop fighting against it, but it relinquishes some of that angst for you when you are able to step into acceptance. Are you able to articulate what that journey looked like for you? Because I think it's an important, and like I talk about acceptance so much on this podcast, but I don't think people really understand the process of getting to that place of acceptance,
Sure.
particularly with death.
Yeah. So as soon as you said that, I thought of Tara Brock and radical acceptance and the work that she does with that. I would say, okay, one thing that always irked me was when people would say everything happens to for a reason. So that feels more like condoning or relinquishing. I came finally to the knowing that I can trust in the unfolding. And that to me is the quote I use around radical acceptance. I did a lot of work. Like I said, I'm a coach, a Brazilians coach. And during my certification process, I'm so grateful that we spent time on healing for me before I start working with others because I was able to go straight into the fear of what my death would mean to others. And I also then, years later, was able to start to explore if my daughter should die before we think it's time, what that would do to me. And it would not erase the despair. But the work that my mentor at the time helped me do was realize that it is inevitable. And when we can accept that, then we're able to focus on what we have here in this moment and decide how we want to experience it. We may not have control around our circumstances. Our power lies in deciding how we want to show up within those circumstances.
And I think that's a great definition across the board, right? Like as far as acceptance is concerned, because I think a lot of time our resistance to circumstances or our resistance even to the unknown is
Yeah.
what keeps us stuck. And we have to embrace the inevitable, whether or
Mm.
not we agree with it or not. And I think once we can get to that point, it allows us to step out of the future and be present,
Yes.
or step out of the past in some cases and be present, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is an important part of the healing process for anyone. Oftentimes, when we experience trauma, whether it medical, whether it, whatever it is, we kind of get stuck in the narrative that we carry about that trauma. And being able to get to a place of acceptance, whatever that looks like, allows us to appreciate what we have in this moment rather than what's happened or the expectations we had for our future that no longer are in alignment. So we're going to circle back to these lessons you spoke about because I am very curious about what you learned about yourself while in survival mode.
So, one of the things that always happened and kind of bothered me, but I didn't know why, was like once my daughter might have a long absence from school and I'd bring her back and then people would ask, oh, how she's doing, and I'd share and then be like, oh, you're so strong, how do you do it, you're so resilient, and I was like, I don't feel strong. Like I'm barely pulling myself out of bed every day. Like, what do you mean, how do I do it? Do I have a choice? And the lesson I learned through researching resilience and what it means, and compassion fatigue and compassion resilience. And then I landed upon prosilience, which is proactive resilience building. What I learned was what we already talked about. We can't control the circumstances with which we're facing, but we can control or decide how we show up. And I didn't want to show up in despair. I was thinking, why are we working so hard to heal me? Why am I taking this medication every day to heal me? Why are we doing all of this, to support and heal her if we're not going to truly live life? What's the reason for being here on earth if we aren't here to learn and enjoy and connect and feel love? And so that's what really started my lesson learning, was that perspective shift, some of those reframes, and knowing that I couldn't live the way I was living anymore. I couldn't, anxiety was manifesting physically for me. I couldn't eat without curling up in a fetal position on my bed. I was a wall puncher. I was punching walls in front of my child out of frustration and overwhelm. And as I started to learn more about myself and facing the fear of what was happening and trying to get to the love instead, I started to find pockets of peace. Even in those moments when we lived in the hospital for a month during COVID after one of her surgeries, and it could have been horrible. I mean, it wasn't fun. I hated that she was experiencing these things, but the three of us, my husband, my daughter, and I, were in one hospital room for about a month. And we found those little ways to connect and love, even in the midst of this really scary, difficult thing that was happening. And that's what I want to experience.
In your articulation of that, what I heard also was giving yourself grace, right? Like being able to get to a place of grace. You mention compassion, resilience. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I
Okay.
researched compassion resilience because I didn't like I didn't like the energy around compassion fatigue. So I found compassion resilience to study as well.
So what exactly is that? Because when you said it, I was like, what is that? What is
What
she
is
talking
that?
about here?
So I mean, I think you said it. It's finding those moments instead of compassion fatigue is about like I'm in it, I'm down on my knees, I'm trying to white knuckle my way back up.
Mm-hmm,
Let's treat it as it comes along. Compassion resilience is maybe that, but doing it with more grace for yourself
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and being able to recognize some compassionate self-care to help yourself build, your resilience. And that was really good to understand and start to read about. But as soon as I read about this framework, prosilience, developed by an industrial and organizational psychologist, I like read the book and I'm like, holy cow, she's been following me since I was 15. I I didn't know this is how I was doing it. And it is. And once I had the words, it was like I was able to incorporate it into my DNA even more. And so I don't fall down. Or if
mm-hmm.
I do, because I get stressed, I get anxious, maybe I don't fall down as far and I don't have to use as much energy to bring myself back up to my baseline of where how I want to function and meet life.
And that makes a lot of sense. Now, you mentioned something that made me smile when you said, people were like, oh, you're so strong. And you're like, oh, I just barely dragged myself out of bed. What are you talking about? And I know for myself, when I was going through my trauma and navigating that, and people were beginning to understand what I was going through, and I think, in a sense, thought they were complimenting me because, wow, how did you get through that? Like, oh my gosh, you're such a strong woman. And in hindsight, yes. But when you are knee deep in the trenches of trauma or survival mode and trying to navigate your way through that, when like you're literally fighting to make it through the day, there is no solace in those kind of comments. And I get that people mean well when they say it. But again, like you said, like, well, what choice do I have? Like, it's either I'm strong or I'm dead. Like, I don't have a choice here. And if I had a choice, I wouldn't even be battling this in this moment. I know it took me a while to be able to rephrase that so that I can receive it as a compliment, so that I can receive it as, a positive thing. But I know in the midst of it, when I really couldn't even see the purpose of my struggle, I couldn't see the end of that dark, dark tunnel. The last thing I wanted someone to say to me or compliment me on is my journey through, because I didn't want to be there in the first place. It wasn't by choice. It wasn't by probably by design, because I myself believe in a higher power as well. And I recognize that we all have purpose. But in saying that, right, how can someone on the outside actually give us support which doesn't feel like a backhanded compliment?
I mean, I think that's such an individual experience as well.
Hmm.
So the work I do focuses on supporting organizations and foundations and nonprofits who support a community of family caregivers. So one thing I talk about a lot is like, hey, when people say, hey, be sure to take care of yourself or, get some self-care in time and you actually want to throw something at them, that's all they know how to say. Like they don't know how to help. Uh, So like you said, first of all, going in for the tone, the context underneath what they're saying versus the words that are actually coming out of their mouth. Like, can we connect to that energy of the comment because I think when people say, "Oh my gosh, you're so strong, you're so resilient, I don't know how you do it," they are actually giving us some admiration, even if in the time that's not what we need. What we need for them to say is, I don't know, I bet you're tired. I'm going to bring you a meal tonight. Like, or I'm not sure how I can support you the best right now. Do you have an idea? And if not, then I'm going to bring you by coffee tomorrow. You don't even have to see me or open the door. I'll just set it on your doorstep. Just know it's going to be there at 8:30. So, I mean, it depends on who you are and how your love languages, if you will. Like, is your love language action? Is it someone bringing you coffee, or is it someone just sitting by you and holding your hand
Hmm.
in
I,
silence?
I I agree it's definitely individual, but I loved how, you incorporated those questions, right? Like how oftentimes, and then this is I'm operating from a perspective of the non-survival mood or in this
Right.
moment, right?
Yeah, yeah.
We and then I lost my train of thought.
You know what I always say? It'll come back.
It will
It'll
come back.
it'll come back.
It will come back. Okay,
Yeah.
so coming from a space of not maybe not necessarily understanding in fullness what someone is experiencing as the
Hmm.
non-survival mooder, we'll call it.
Yes.
I think there is a gap in understanding of how to support. And oftentimes people fill in the gaps based on what they know. And one of the things that I've always thought was helpful in my recovery and in my journey was someone actually asking me how they can support me, right? Because that could change from day to day. One day
Yes.
I might need a hug. The next day I might need a whole bottle of alcohol.
Right?
But rather than assume, I've always respected someone who says, well, I don't know. So how can I? And for those who are listening, the reason why I ask this is because I think sometimes we have to step outside of ourselves and not make assumptions about someone's mindset, about what they are experiencing, because as you said, it's all personal.
Hmm.
One person can go through, or two people can go through the exact same event, but need different things as a result. So if you are finding or coming across someone who may be right in the midst of survival mode, rather than make assumptions, just
Hmm.
ask a question.
Yeah.
And
I
I think
totally
that
agree.
makes a huge difference
Yeah.
in someone else's recovery and then also how they receive,
Hmm.
because we all know it comes from a good place.
Yeah.
But it's not always received in that manner because of our state of mind and what
Hmm.
else we've been through. And like you kind of talked about it earlier about how, you know, your body didn't forget the trauma and it was compounded by the second time around. It was just like, whoosh, this big thing. And that's often what happens. We are dealing with compounded issues, and then it seems like we have things under control, and then all of a sudden it's like this runaway train, and we don't know how to get it back under control. So what I needed 5 minutes ago, I need something completely different now. But to be able to offer support that is received, that is appreciated, just ask a question. It's as simple as that.
I agree. And then I also want to just ask the non-survival moder to keep in mind that if the person in survival mode answers with a, I don't know, or nothing, it's not that they don't need or appreciate the support. It's that they literally cannot put a finger on what could help them at that moment, most likely because of everything that's flooding their entire system. And so that's where I kind of also like to say, okay, I understand that you may not know what you need right now. Is it okay if I drop off a couple magazines? Or, is it okay if and I would say yes to this always, is it okay if I take the kiddo for you for an hour and you get to rest?
Mhm.
So let's just be connected and not take anything personally on either side when we're having those types of communications, because sometimes the survivaler really can't put a finger on what they need.
Mhm. A lot of times we can't even put a finger on the basic things, right? Like, I've been walking since I've been one. I cannot even put one foot in front of the other in this moment. You know what I mean? So, yes, I've really enjoyed this conversation, Jan. One of the things that I think really came up is being able to get back into the present state, even despite, what's going on around us. So tell us a little bit more about how you work with clients and how we can find you online.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, you can find me online at Jenn Fred, JENN Fred, FRED.bio.link. And then different ways to work with me are located there. Like I said, I do partner with health systems, nonprofits, foundations who support a community of family caregivers. I offer workshops. I also started Carewell Circle, which is a membership platform for family caregivers to come in and just find relief. You were talking about being present. One of the main things I share every week are pause practices. How can we be where our feet are so that we can experience life the way that we want to? I also have a free guide called the Relief You Can Get When You Can't Get Away. And so some different ideas to put into practice in your life when you are in the midst of it all. Because I want to help people experience their life the way they want to without waiting for it to get better, because we can feel the way we want to feel even if our circumstances are not what we had hoped to be experiencing.
I love that. And we'll make sure that that information is in the show notes. So, Jan, before we wrap it all up, one key takeaway for the audience to action.
So I'm going to invite everyone, when they're in that moment of swirl or overwhelm, one of the best things you can do for yourself is feel your feet on the ground and use your breath as a remote control for your brain. So you can just come back into the present moment. You can be in a responsive mode versus a reaction mode so that you can decide how you want to show up in the moment.
I love that. You got to decide, audience. Jan, thank you again for your time on Survival Mode Disrupted. And audience, thank you for catching another episode. I just want to remind you, you were not built to break, but you damn sure were not built to just survive. So disrupt the cycle, reclaim your life, and thrive on your own terms. And I will see you next week. Once again, thank you for joining another episode of Survival Mode Disrupted, hosted by the Survival Mode Disruptor, Letitia. You didn't land here by accident. This conversation, it probably cracked something open on purpose. Because survival mode isn't just a phase, it's a pattern, an identity, a prison masked as strength. But here's the truth: you're not broken, you're just unfinished. So if something stirred in you today, don't ignore it, don't numb it, move with it. And I want to once again invite you to join Disrupting Survival Mode, the Facebook community where healing is loud and messy and real. I also want to invite you to buy my book, The Survival Mode Action Plan, because your breakthrough deserves a blueprint. And if you felt seen today, be sure to share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Like, subscribe, and drop a review. That's how amplify the voices that need to be heard. And remember, this isn't about fixing yourself. This is about finding yourself again beneath the rubble. Until next time, choose ease, choose power, choose you. This is Survival Mode Disrupted. Let's keep shaking shit up.